What's up, guys? So we left off shooting projectiles. It was kind of uneventful because we only shot one and it never repeated. However, you guys probably didn't have the same bug because go ahead and open the project where we left off and open your tower script. When I was debugging off camera, I accidentally commented out our attack counter that we were decrementing by delta time every time update was called. So attack was only called once and only one projectile could be called. And that's why the second tower didn't shoot at all. So when you guys ran this, hopefully your project worked great. Other than the fact that the projectiles were staying on the page, but as long as they were shooting and everything, really sweet. So I uncommented this. Let's save this file and we'll run this just to make sure that's it, right? So I'll place this tower and there we go. Multiple arrows. Phew. Just a silly mistake on my end. And if you were following along, I don't know, maybe you rewatched the video and saw that it was commented out and you also did it. But as you can see here, they actually stopped where it hits the attack range. So that's cool. We know that code's working. So now we just need to add we have to basically add a tag to our enemy collider. So when the arrow hits, we need to subtract enemy health. And then we also have to destroy the enemy object. And let's pull up our code here. So we are done messing around in our tower code for now. If you guys can go ahead and open your enemy script. So let's go to our scripts in our project, our assets folder. Go ahead and not scenes, scripts. So pull that open and double click on enemy and enemy will open right up. And if you remember, we already are looking for colliders, right? That's how we're moving our enemy from checkpoint to checkpoint and to the finish line. So that's pretty cool. All we have to do is search for another tag now. And if you remember the name of our tag, which I don't, let's go ahead and I'm just clicking on any prefab so I can see our tag names. It's projectile with a lowercase p. That's easy enough. So if we just go into our enemy script, right here on the on trigger, enter 2D is where we're going to keep track of those arrows hitting our enemy. And we are going to do a else if underneath the tag looking for the finish. And all we're going to do is look for other.tag, and we are seeing if it's equal to projectile. That's pretty harmless. And just to make sure this is getting called and it works right away, let's destroy the projectile game object right away. So destroy, and then you're going to type other because that's just what gets passed into the collider. And in this case, other, if it makes it into this if statement, this else if block, it will be the projectile. So if we say destroy other.game object, that should destroy the arrows or any projectile that hits the enemy now. So let's go ahead and run and test this. So don't forget to save it. And it's running. Now when they shoot, yep, they shoot and they disappear. That's exactly what we want. Let's build one more tower to make sure that, okay, that's pretty cool. And have we seen fireballs yet? Ooh, fireballs. That's cool. And let's do rocks. So everything looks like it's working. It looks like this arrow didn't destroy itself when it hit its range, so we'll have to figure that out. But other than that, everything's working pretty cool. So let's go back to our enemy script. So now that we're destroying our game objects, obviously We need more than that because our enemies are invincible right now, and obviously we don't want that. So we should probably have like health points, right? And why don't we go ahead and make that a private float? Let's make it a serialized field so we can adjust these in our inspector. We have 3 different enemies, right? So we can have different health for each one of them, like Scully, the guy with no helmet. He should probably be the easiest to kill, and then we can work our way up. So let's make this a serialized field so it's adjustable to us on the inspector window. And let's just go ahead and call this private int and health points. Yeah, that's good for now. So we have health points. So in here, we should probably call something like a function enemy hit. I'm going to call mine enemy hit. So go ahead and make a public void enemy hit. So we will pass in the projectile attack strength. If you remember when we created our projectile, we can open that script real quick. We made this variable called attack strength. So we want to know what attack strength our enemy just got hit with. So that is an int. So let's do that. And we'll call this hit points. That makes sense. So all we want to do is subtract health points with hit points. So if we call our variable and do a minus equals and then subtract hit points, now we'll take off health. And up here, we need to be able to access the projectile script. And unfortunately, like doing game object, we can't find attack strength through that because it actually doesn't know what game object this is. So we have to use get component, and I know we've used it before, but what get component does is it basically can get built-in Unity components, so like transform or sprite renderer, like what we used for dragging the tower sprites around. You can also use it to reference scripts. So this just will this will basically get the projectile component so we can access variables inside the script. And what we will do there is we'll just declare a new variable of type projectile and just call it new p. We're only using it down here. And it's going to be other.game object. And now we have to do get component here. So we're taking this game object that we have, but we don't know what kind of game object it is. And we're looking for a game object called projectile. And it will find this since we have a script for it and return it and allow us to access all the variables now using the variable new p. So we can go enemy hit now and use this function we just created and pass in new p dot attack strength. And since this is a public getter on our projectile, that will work. So now we are subtracting our hit points found from the projectile that hit our enemy, which is really cool because we have 3 different projectiles that all are tagged the same way. But now when we find the component of that projectile, we'll know the different attack strength. And that's really cool. So we'll know if it's a bow or a rock or a fireball. And the enemy takes care of all his own health. So our enemy will take away his health. He'll call his own die animation function and his hurt animation function. And that's really cool. So there's a few things here. We don't want health points to be able to drop below 0, obviously. So let's put an if statement in here. And we need to check if health points minus hit points is going to be greater than 0. All right. And obviously we need the health points minus hit points inside of this. Oh my gosh. Okay. There we go. And let's see here. Perfect. So now we can't subtract more than 0. So if it is going to be greater than 0, or I mean less than 0, that means the enemy should die, right? So if health points minus the current hit points is going to go lower than 0 or equal to 0, the enemy needs to die. So we need an else if here. And we will call some sort of die method here. Enemy should die. Okay. And we also should call, remember when we set up all our animations? So we have a die animation and a hurt animation. So we should call our hurt animation here and our die animation here. And it shouldn't be an else if, just an else. What am I doing? All right, so we should set up some more stuff here. We need to make a die call. So our enemy needs to die, and it needs to know that it shouldn't keep marching and moving. Because right now, if we just subtracted his health points, nothing's happening. So let's go ahead and create another method, a public void, and call this one die. And this is going to take care of everything we need to kill our enemy. If it dies, we don't want the game object to disappear, right? We want his body to stay on the screen, because we could just remove the game object, but then that wouldn't be fun. Like, I feel like it's cool to see all the enemies that you killed in that wave. One thing we need to think about, though, is if an enemy is sitting there, we need to know if he's dead. Otherwise, the update method that is making him move will keep getting called, and whether we play a die animation or not, the enemy will keep sliding across the screen whether he looks like he's walking or not. So I think we should make a Boolean variable to just keep track of if our enemy is dead, and just call it is dead. And let's originally set it to false, because he's not dead when he's created. And then down here, we'll say is dead is equal to true. So when this is called, it will be set to true. So then in our update, this waypoints, if waypoints is not equal to null, it enters this. We also need to add one, and if the enemy is not dead. So if enemy is not equal to true, it'll still enter this. So that is cool. So let's think. All right. So let's go ahead, and we could probably, if enemy, so we need to call our enemy method inside of our enemy hit in that else statement. So go ahead and put die there. We could probably call this. Let's go ahead and run this. And when our enemies die, they should just walk in place and stop moving, because that walking animation is a loop, so it'll keep going and going. But let's just see if this logic works. So it should take, all right, so one shot killed him. All right. Oh. So it seems like it's working. That's kind of cool. All right, it seems like we might have a few bugs we have to figure out. All right, so it looks like this is keeping a lock on. So the closest enemy, it keeps finding this guy and is killing him. So what we could do to fix that, we could deactivate the collider on the enemy. So let's go back into our enemy script. And just like we up here when we had the transform. I'm not seeing this enemy, the transform from moving him, and we did the get component. We can do the same thing for the 2D collider. So I think we should do that, and then we'd have a variable that we can access, and we can disable the 2D collider once he's dead. So why don't we go ahead and put in a private variable, and this will be collider 2D, make sure it's 2D, and then we'll just call this enemy collider. All right. And then we need to get the component just like we did for the transform and also the game object for the projectile when we destroyed it. So go ahead and say enemy collider equals get component. And this is going to be collider 2D. And that will give us access to the collider on the enemy. Now we just go down to our die function and type in enemy collider dot enabled equals false. I think that should take care of them being targeted after they die. Let's go ahead and run this again. Put that up there. It's hard to tell. We have to figure out what these enemies' health points are. It seems very low. Oh, sure enough. So if we go into our enemies, we forgot to set them. So their health is actually at 0, which is why they're dying with one shot. So let's go ahead and make enemy 1. This guy's kind of strong. Let's make him 200. He has a helmet on. Enemy 2 is Scully. I don't know why we can't see him. Oh, we don't have a sprite attached to him. Let's go ahead and fix that. Go into sprites and enemy 2 and just find an idle one, and we can drag 0, 0 into his sprite. There we go. Now we can see him. That's not cool. Okay, so back in our prefabs, enemy 2 is Scully. He doesn't have any armor, so let's just make his health 100. And then enemy 3, he looks the toughest, so he's going to be 300. And you guys can make these whatever you want. This is just what I set it up for. And let's just make sure our projectiles have... Okay, yeah, we set those up. Okay, so let's go ahead and run this again, and hopefully it's harder to kill. Now they should take 2 shots. Okay, cool. But it looks like he's still being targeted. All right, so obviously this isn't good that our enemy... So this guy's still being targeted and he's, you know, dead. So I think we need to fix something on our tower script since that is what's taking care of all the shooting. So let's go into our tower script. Basically, if the target enemy is null, obviously that's not true because we're not removing the game object. So we should do an OR here, and we need to check if target enemy is dead. So we're going to have to make this variable, we're going to have to make a getter for this variable. So I'm going to make this capitalized so it works. And let's go over to our enemy and set up a getter for our Boolean value. So public bool is dead with a capital I. Then we'll just return, oh, we have to do a get and just return is dead with a cap or a lowercase I. And spell return right, and then it will work. All right. So there we go. Now let's go back to our tower. And that should be good. So now if the enemy is null, it'll find another target enemy. Also, if the enemy is marked as dead, which is our Boolean, which we're marking when he runs out of health points, is triggered. So this is awesome. And is dead, it'll have to be true. So that works. So let's try this again. Make sure you save it. All right, so that guy's dead. And he's moving on. He's shooting at different enemies. So that's awesome. It seems like that is working now. And look at that. Changed. Kind of seems like he's not shooting very consistently, but all right, we're getting there. I think it would probably be a good time to maybe call the death animation and maybe the hurt animation when these guys get hit, because that will be just more exciting. So let's go to it. So a few things we need to set up. We created all the animations at the beginning, if you remember. So if you go into your assets, animations, and then the animations folder, and you'll see the little play sign, and that's how you know you're in the right one. You'll see dying 3 times and then hurt 2 and 3. So go ahead and click on dying, and we don't want these to be loop time. We want the animation to happen once. So go ahead and hold shift and select all 3 of the, oh, it's not gonna let me. So we need to just click on dying and uncheck the loop time. We don't want it to loop. Otherwise it would keep playing him standing up and dying, and we just want him to die once and not resurrect himself. That would be a zombie game, and we're not doing that today. All right, so we don't want that to loop. And we also don't want hurt to loop. We just want hurt to play once. So when he gets shot but doesn't die, we want the hurt animation to play, but then he's going to continue walking. So uncheck the loop for hurt. All right, cool. And walking, we want him to loop because that's the default animation that he's doing across the whole screen. So that's ready. Now we can go into our animator. And if you remember, 2 and 3 all inherit from 1. So we only have to set this up in one place. So go ahead and double click on enemy 1, the animator control, and you're going to see something like this. We have our hurt animations, and we set this all up in one of the first videos. So that's pretty cool. We're just ready to use them now. I'm going to go ahead and drag dying above any state here. And you'll see why in a moment. All right, so we have to think about some transitions. And basically, so the enemy is going to be walking, and then all of a sudden he'll get shot, and we're going to trigger the hurt animation out of nowhere, right? We want it to, we want to transition back to walking when it's done playing. So right-click hurt and say make transition. And then just click on walking after that, and you'll see an arrow pointing to walking now. And that is all we need to do for that. And then for dying, we want to right-click any state and make transition and click on dying. And the reason it has to come from any state for dying is because it could be in the middle of the enemy having the hurt animation or the walking animation, and this just means it can interrupt any state and play the dying animation. And then that's that. And we have to do one more thing. We have to create a parameter to call the dying animation. So click on parameters here on the left side, and if you hit this plus arrow, we want a trigger. And let's call this trigger did die. So having this parameter will allow us to call the dying animation from any point in the game as long as we have a reference to the animator controller. And we'll do that next. So this is all we have to do to set up these 2 animations. So now let's go back into our code. Actually, one second. Let's just check out our enemy prefabs. Go to Assets, Prefabs, Enemies. Okay, and see this animator component? So we need to make a variable reference to this and then do the get component so we can access it. And that is how we're going to call these animations. All right, so now we can go back into the code, into our enemy script, and we have to create another variable like we did the collider and transform. And let's make this private, and it's going to be of type animator. And let's just call it Anim for short. I think that's good. Okay, so we have our enemy hit function, and we need to call our hurt animation here and our die animation here. So our hurt animation, you just simply do, we need to get the component. Okay, so we need to go up to start and do anim equals get component. And we are looking for the animator. Okay, now we can do what I wanted to do. Down here, go to the enemy hit function, and let's call our hurt animation. And that all we have to do is type in anim dot play. Nope, not playback. Capital play. And then just parentheses opening and closing. And then inside that, you have to call what you named the animation, and we called it hurt with a capital H. And just to verify that, we can go back into this, the animator controller, and see hurt. It's got a capital H on it, so we know we're right. And then did die, we're going to have to know that one, and that's camel casing. So that's all we have to do for that one. And then for the die animation, let's go ahead and do anim. And then since we set a trigger in the parameters, we're going to call set trigger. Set trigger with a capital S, I think. There we go. It just didn't want to show up. All right, and then here we also need to put this in quotations, and we called this one did die. And the reason we made a trigger for this one is, like I said before, we can call it out of anywhere. We can just play hurt, because when it ends, we made that transition that goes back to walking. With die, we set it up so it can be called from any state. So if hurt is playing or anything, we can just trigger die and it'll play the death animation. So that's what we need. And let's go ahead and save this, and I think we're ready to test this. And remember, spelling counts here. I know I hate when you have to use strings for variables, but it happens. So go ahead and press run after you save it. And let's put a tower out there and see if our... Oh, I saw the hurt animation. And the die one isn't working. But the hurt one is. So you see their eyes get big. That's awesome. All right, let's figure out what we forgot to do with the dying animation. I think I forgot to connect did die to the transition behavior. So go ahead and click on the transition arrow here. And yeah, the conditions, we left it empty. So on the right side, when you have the transition arrow in between any state and dying selected, this one, it's blue. It's unselected blue. Now conditions in the inspector, hit the plus arrow. And all we need to do is have did die there. And it just pulls up because it's the only parameter we have. So save it and let's run it. And let's see if our enemies die. Oh, I had to build a tower. All right, now let's see if they get shot. Our enemies are too quick. Hey, look at that. The die animation worked. We have a dying enemy and we have shooting projectiles. Like, this is cool, right? I think we can call this video done. And in the next one, we'll work on, let's see, what do we have to work on? We have to work on like keeping score and maybe adding money and transactions into this, and eventually some UI for like playing and then next wave, all that good stuff. So we have a lot of like little cleanup to do, but like this is really cool. We kill an enemy and he's just sitting there, just waiting. Poor guy. But cool. And I will see you guys in the next video.